Some months back, maybe sometime last year, I came across some fabulous interviews with a woman named Katy Faust, and was just thrilled to see how she communicated, the clarity of her thought, the mingling together of love and truth, and then discovered the website Ask the Bigot. Ask the Bigot. And realized, this is the same person. Katy is a state leader at Kady Vox, blogger at Ask the Bigot, and on the Academic Council for the International Children's Rights Institute. She's Christian, mother of four, pastor's wife, and was raised by two moms, and yet in that sense is uniquely qualified to address these issues of marriage and family. Katy, it's an absolute delight to have you on the line of fire.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, my joy. First, before we get into the key issues and get your perspective on these things, what makes you uniquely qualified to address some of the pressing moral and cultural issues when it comes to marriage and family?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to begin here, because I don't present myself as someone that was raised by two moms. My parents were married until I was 10. They fought very hard to keep their marriage together. After the divorce, I split time between their two homes, and at that point, my mom met and fell in love with another woman, and so I would, be with the two of them when I was with my mom, and then with my dad the other half of the time. And while I did not consider my mom's partner a mother, I did consider her my friend, and have loved them throughout their relationship. But thankfully, my parents were able to work out an arrangement where I didn't lose contact with either one of them. And so, as I talked about, I filed an amicus brief for the Obergefell case that went before the Supreme Court last year, and spent a good amount of time in that brief talking about the unique and distinct impact that my father had on my life, even after the divorce. So I don't think I can speak from a perspective that many children with same-sex parents come from, because many of those children were raised in an environment where their other biological parent was excluded from their home, and that wasn't my case. But what I can do is speak from the perspective of somebody who sees the goodness of man-woman marriage and fathers and mothers raising their children together, and having a deep and fierce love for the LGBT community.
Yes, and thank you for clarifying the sloppiness of the way I presented things. I do appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. It's a kind of shorthand, but I just want to make sure that everyone's getting a real fair picture here.
Right. So the benefit that you do have is that you can see, in that sense, through both windows. You can see past the caricatures against many LGBT people and the way LGBT parents may be caricatured by critics. And you can also see the importance of having both a mother and a father. And as well, the third window you can look through is the one of the trauma of divorce and the challenges of that. So speak candidly to me and to our audience, Katy. You're involved on the front lines of what could be called the culture wars, and yet I'm sure you often see a lack of love, lack of compassion, lack of empathy from our side in terms of LGBT community.
Well, I didn't want to wade into the waters of speaking about this publicly. And, of course, when I began blogging, it was anonymous. But I was tearing my hair out because I felt like on our side of the equation, either people were forsaking truth so that they could embrace people in love, which, of course, is important to recognize the value and dignity and worth of everybody, or they were falling so hard on the side of truth that they were closing their hearts to our LGBT brothers and sisters. And so for me, just speaking biblically, and then from a practical perspective of interacting with and loving people on all different sides of this issue, the conclusion that I came to is, especially if you call yourself a Christian, especially if you consider yourself biblical, there is only one way to deal with this issue, and that is hold on to truth with all of your might and do not compromise one bit, and run after and love with reckless abandon those people that disagree with you, especially the LGBT community. And the truth is that you have to do both, right? That there has to be complete love and I would say initiating relationships with our LGBT friends and family, and not giving up one iota of the truth about marriage and sexuality. And so that's a really hard balance, because most of us are either grace givers or truth tellers, and we tend to major on one or the other, but the reality is that all of us have to do both. So I began writing about this because I didn't see those two ends of the spectrum being spoken about and acted on by many in this debate.
Yeah, and when God began to lay this on my heart in 2004 to get involved in these issues, because there's nothing in my own background that would connect me to this, but when I realized it was a pressing issue in our society, I began to look at the issue. And as I began to look at the issue, I said, I need to find out about the people. And hence my heart broke for the people, while my resolve stiffened in terms of standing up for truth. And what was laid on my heart was reach out to the people with compassion, resist the agenda with courage, or put another way, we need hearts of compassion and backbones of steel. And Kady, I've appreciated, and I may even play a couple of clips, seeing you in some somewhat hostile or critical settings, that you respond, you're never on the defensive. You respond with dignity and with love and with truth, and yet you're still going to be called a bigot because you don't affirm homosexual practice as being right or best. You don't believe that two dads or two moms is best for a child. So because you don't celebrate same-sex, quote, marriage, you are therefore a bigot, hence the blog title. So how do we overcome that?
Well, I think that you need to give up. I think all of us, that's the whole point of why I began blogging under that name. As you might be able to guess, it was kind of born in an angry moment, because I realized there really isn't anything that I can do to not be a bigot. The only way to not be a bigot is to toe the line of sexual progressives, hook, line, and sinker, right? That, like, just swallow it and accept it and shill for it. Otherwise, you're a bigot, right? It doesn't matter whether or not you have principled, well-reasoned, secularly articulated arguments for this. It doesn't matter that you love and accept and reach out to the gay and lesbians in your life. It doesn't matter, right? You are a bigot if you don't agree with this one very polarizing tenet of pop culture. And so that's where I just said, okay, fine. If you think that me supporting traditional marriage simply makes me a bigot, then look at my life. Look at my life, right? And so that's the point, is for people that come to the blog or my Twitter account or my public Facebook feed, whatever it is, that they would see somebody that holds on to truth, that it's grounded in natural law, the best social science, and that respects the dignity and worth of everybody involved in the discussion.
Yeah, so friends, you can go to askthebigot.com, and Hebrews 13, let us go outside the camp bearing the reproach he bore. Just accept the fact that unless you totally toe the line with the latest PC correctness, you're going to be characterized that way, and then you have to overcome that with the conduct of your life, the words that you say. How can folks connect with you on Twitter or Facebook?
Well, I'm at Twitter at AskTheBigot,
Okay.
and
That works. It works.
Yeah. It wasn't a handle that was taken, and I'm blogging these days. I'm just coming off a summer break where there wasn't a whole lot of productivity, but I'm back in the saddle. So I didn't get into this debate because I hate being called names. I like to be liked and I hate to be hated, and I just didn't want people to not like me. But it got to the point where I realized, the other side is dominating this discussion, because ordinary people like me don't want to have to deal with the rancor that goes along with this debate. And as a result, I feel like we kind of handed it to the other side. And so there is no way to avoid it. You will be called names. People will not like you. But this cause is worth it, because I think, as you and I are going to discuss, this really is not about adults. This entire discussion about marriage is really about children and the rights and well-being of children. And if there is anything that Christians especially, but in general all adults, should be for, it is protecting the rights and well-being of the most vulnerable among us. I think that maybe people don't understand the depth and the importance of this issue, because it has been framed in a way that focuses on adult desires rather than child rights.
Right. So what we hear, and we're going to focus the rest of our interview on the children. What we hear constantly is, hey, if two men or two women want to marry, how does that affect your marriage? Which is really not the question, because if someone's single, if someone's sleeping with their boyfriend or girlfriend, if someone has three ladies living in the house with a guy, if someone's committing adultery, how does that affect your marriage? That's really the wrong question to ask. But in reality, it does end up affecting everyone. So I want to come back and focus in on the issue of the children. That's why Kady does what she does. Go to askthebigot.com to find out more. Connect with her on Twitter, Ask the Bigot. We'll find out about the Academic Council for the International Children's Rights Institute. We'll find out about Kady Vox. We'll find out about the 5 basic rights for every child.
Now, how is it that the daughter of lesbian mothers has become a leading opponent of gay marriage? How does that work?
Well, simply because I recognize that while my mother was a fantastic mother, and most of what I do well as a mother myself, I do because that's how she parented me, she can't be a father. Her partner, an incredible woman, both of these women have my heart, cannot be a father either. Children have a right to be in relationship with their mother and father whenever possible, and as a society, we shouldn't normalize a family structure that requires children to lose one or both parents to be in that household.
That is the voice of Katy Faust. As I watched this clip from last year on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation broadcast with Tony Jones from last December, I was cheering her on for the clarity of speech, for the love that she expresses for her mother and the partner that raised her part of her life, and for her clarity on why this really matters. Kady, I've said the world's best mother is not a father and the world's best father is not a mother, thinking that's pretty self-evident, only to get howls of criticism. But it doesn't get much more basic than that, does it?
No. And I think that in this quest for equality that the left has pushed so significantly in recent years, what they've had to come to the point of saying that you're not equal unless you're the same. And there's this incredible minimizing of gender differences, right? And the need to say that really men and women are interchangeable. From that stems these debates and discussions we're having about transgenderism, that gender is fluid. But the truth is, obviously, that it takes a man and a woman to make a baby. And those are also the ideal conditions within which to raise the child, because fathers and mothers offer distinct and complementary benefits to children, and children have a right to both their mother and father. And so my whole goal is to try and help people understand these issues from the child's perspective rather than an adult-centric perspective.
You wrote a letter that went viral, Dear Justice Kennedy, an open letter from the child of a loving gay parent in February of 2015. And, of course, that was part of the amicus brief submitted to the Supreme Court last year. Were you surprised with the response to your letter and to the degree that it circulated, or does it make sense because, yes, you're articulating what many are feeling?
Well, yes, I was surprised, totally, because I'm not anybody special. I'm not saying anything that anybody cannot say, right? I'm stating basic fundamental truths. I just think that people had not considered this discussion from the child's perspective, and that simply is that government's interest in marriage is not your love life. Government's interest in marriage does not have to do with whom you share love and connection. Government's interest in marriage is that children come from a man and a woman, and that statistically we know that children fare best when they are raised in an intact, married, low-conflict household. And therefore, government should incentivize men, especially committing to the women with whom they are making children. If you do so, you are drastically going to reduce rates of poverty and high incarceration, and you're going to improve academic performance for children. There's major social fallout for society when we abandon these norms of gendered marriage. But I think that people had not considered the cost to children, because when you redefine marriage, you redefine parenthood. Since government's interest in marriage is children, not affirming a lifestyle or giving an endorsement to your romantic connections, government's interest in marriage is children. Therefore, redefining marriage redefines parenthood. What that means is children who grow up within a same-sex headed household will grow up missing half of their heritage, with at least one parent who is not biologically related to them. They will lose out on the incredible benefits of male and female love in their household, and that it's an injustice to the child to normalize that kind of family structure for kids. And I think that that article was widely shared because people had not considered that there was a cost to kids. We had looked at this so much through the lens of adult desires, and saying things like, well, what are you saying, that LGBT people can't be good parents? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that women can't be men and men can't be women. I'm saying that women can't father and men don't mother, and kids need both. And I'm saying that you can't minimize the importance of a biological connection when you're talking about parenthood. So I just think that article in particular presented it in a way that people hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, and tell us about Kady Vox. Many people are certainly not familiar with this.
Yeah, Kady Vox is new, and it's fantastic. Kady Vox, in my opinion, is what is going to change the culture. It is a grassroots marriage organization that develops reading groups all around the United States and the world for people who want to study all of these issues that are affecting marriage and sexuality in the pop culture right now. Because I think that the left has rightly criticized conservatives for saying, well, you don't seem to care about all these other things affecting marriage and family, but suddenly gay marriage comes up and you're chewing the carpet about it. But the reality is that we've got all kinds of issues that those of us who love marriage understand the benefit to the individual child and society. There's all kinds of things that are assaulting that family structure, which is the building block of our entire society, whether it's pornography or divorce or cohabitation or, the sex ed curriculum that's being presented to our children. We need to educate ourselves in a way where we can then go out and be the change, be the effective ambassadors for the truth in our social sphere, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, even in our churches. And so Kady Vox equips women and men, but it's definitely a mother-led organization, to understand these issues. We do it in a way that uses natural law, and so we have reading groups that are Muslim. We have a Jewish leader. We've got Mormon reading groups, lots of Catholic reading groups, and then, some evangelicals as well. And all of us are reading these readings on these different topics that rely on natural law and social science and common sense, paired with personal stories, so that you really get a sense of understanding the issues that are impacting marriage and family and sexuality today. And it's almost as if we create a haven of free speech where women can get together and understand these so they can better go out and discuss it with their friends and equip their children to stand firm too. And of course, it has the fantastic benefit of strengthening your own marriage as well, because we have reading sessions on marital intimacy and communication in marriage and friendship in marriage, so that our marriages can be what they are supposed to be as well. And understanding, too, that the strength of our marriage can impact society as a whole.
Yeah, what a great grassroots concept, and thanks for getting my pronunciation right on that. What's the way for folks to connect with this?
KadyVox.com. You can go there. You can read about our vision, mission. You can look at the syllabus and the incredible women who are leading this venture. It truly is grassroots, and it's the most exciting thing in my life. I love it.
Wow! All right, I'm thrilled to pass this on to our listeners. KadyVox.com. Everybody, go there. Moms in particular, head over there. We'll announce it again. More to come with Katy Faust.
The question is, what is government's interest in marriage? It's really not about affirming the connections that we have with one another. It has to do with the product of those unions. And there's something distinct about the product of a union between heterosexuals. What's distinct is that they make babies, and those babies have rights, and those babies deserve protection.
That's the voice of Katy Faust. She's on this interview was December 8th, 2015 on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation broadcast. Katy blogs at askthebigot.com. and is an enthusiastic participant of Kady Vox, giving marriage a voice. You can find out more about that at katyvox.com. I'm looking at the website right now. Kady, in short, marriage conveys benefits on society, namely producing children for the next generation, joining those children to a mother and father. So society conveys benefits on marriage. If not for that, the government has no business getting involved with who you date, who you love, who you room with, or whatever. So government's looking at this on a pragmatic level. But let's focus now on children. If you can do this in 3 or 4 minutes, you have articulated through the Academic Council for the International Children's Rights Institute 5 basic rights. At least let's get started on this. What are the rights of children?
So as the International Children's Rights Institute kind of enumerates here, there are some fundamental rights, and unfortunately the term children's rights has to be taken back because the left has used that almost to mean children's sexual rights.
Yes.
But there are foundational rights spoken about, outlined in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is the most widely ratified treaty in the world, and it begins with a child's right to live. It is followed by a child's right to be in connection with her mother and father. These are foundational rights, followed up by a child's right to be born free and not bought and sold, to not be considered a commodity. Everything needed to have a basic standard of existence, and a child's right to be protected from abuse and exploitation, the right to modesty. And at Kady Vox, we also recognize a child's right to be raised according to their biological gender. So it's peeling back a little bit of the ideological narrative that has been thrown out there about children and getting down to the bare bones basics. They have a right to live. They have a right to not be arbitrarily separated from their parents. They have a right to not be commodified and bought and sold. They have a right to modesty and protection. And so that's, children don't get to lobby and organize and blog. And adults are the ones that have been dominating most of these conversations. But when we get right down to the heart of children's basic rights, that's what they are. And if we respect child rights, that means that adults need to accommodate those rights rather than stripping children of these rights that they are born with that deserve protection and asking those children to fit into their lifestyle. And I'm not just talking about gays and lesbians. I am talking about anybody that is making decisions and lifestyle choices that ask children to sacrifice these fundamental rights.
Yeah, and we've got a short segment here. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. But as I'm looking at the Kady Vox website and scrolling down looking at state leaders, I see your picture for Washington State right next to someone who I've had on the air in years past, Alana from Louisiana, and the Anonymous Us Project. So these are children of anonymous sperm donors who are disconnected from fathers, and the poems and the stories on that website are moving. I read one of them, just about broke down on the air. So these kids, just because you can have these sperm banks and anonymous donors, don't even have the right to know who the father is. I mean, it's outrageous, and the impact that it has on them for life. So this is all about the children. When we come back, I want to ask specifically, what about, we hear all these reports that 2 moms, 2 dads, just as good as a mom and dad. How does Kady respond to that? You may have read last year an open letter to Justice Kennedy from a woman who, for part of her upbringing, was raised by her mother and a partner. Mother and father divorced at 10, so she divided time between her father's home and her mother's home. And for some of that time, her mother had a partner. And she wrote an open letter to Justice Kennedy about the importance of not redefining marriage. You may have gone to her blog, askthebigot.com. Yes, because you're called a bigot when you say that marriage is the union of a man and a woman and a kid should have a mom and dad. Hence, askthebigot.com. My guest, Katy Faust. Kady, we hear this all the time. Well, the latest research indicates that kids do just fine with 2 moms or 2 dads. In some cases, they do even better than with a mom and a dad. And wouldn't you rather have a kid with 2 loving moms or 2 loving dads rather than, say, with an alcoholic father who beats the mother? You've heard all this over and over. How do you respond in terms of data, in terms of experience?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. Studies are tough because if you haven't had a chance to really, really look into things, you can just say, well, one study says this and one study says that, so what are you going to believe? But if you actually look at the studies that report no difference between children who are raised in intact married homes with their mother and father and children raised with same-sex couples, the ones that say that there's no difference, in general, use very small sample sizes. They do not use participants who were, derived randomly. They tend to be recruited or volunteers, and as any good researcher knows, the outcomes are going to be skewed, probably, if somebody goes into it knowing what the study's about and with an intention to give an answer that is going to have a favorable outcome. If you instead have longitudinal studies that study kids for the long term, that use massive data samples, and that are randomly derived, when you look at those studies, overwhelmingly, the data supports that children raised in intact married homes with their mother and father in low-conflict marriages fare the best. And so I will present it differently to people. I'll say, when you're not talking about same-sex parenting, social scientists tend to agree on several things. Number one, that biological parents tend to be the most invested and attached and connected to and permanent and stable in a child's life. Number two, they recognize that mothers and fathers offer complementary benefits to children. Number three, that non-biological parents tend to be more transitory, less invested, and more dangerous in a child's life. And number four, that anytime there's separation from parent to child, whether it's abandonment, divorce, third-party reproduction, or death, that there's trauma, and that impacts child development. So how is it that when those four factors are involved and you're not studying same-sex parenting, social scientists discover diminished outcomes for children? But suddenly when you study same-sex parenting, even though all four of those are going to be a factor, now there's no difference in child outcomes. That's where you have to say, okay, there must be something else going on here than simple research and data collection, right? That obviously this has been so politicized, and there's been an incentive for researchers to come to a certain conclusion that the studies that we have are not giving us the unvarnished truth. Dr. Paul Sullins did a huge study using data from the National Institute of Health. It was a longitudinal study. It came out early this year, I think in June, and it showed an incredible deficit for children, especially in the area of mental health later on in adulthood for kids that were raised with same-sex couples. And the data size, the pool of participants was vast compared to some of these other studies that were done that reported no difference. Some of them would have 40 or 80 participants, and this one had tens of thousands. So you really have to look at the study to know whether or not to give weight to it or not.
Yeah, and there was one recent study that I saw that asked the parents their perceptions on how the kids were doing. And
exactly.
then it's been kind of an in-house secret that kids raised by same-sex parents were more likely to experience gender confusion, more likely to experience homosexual attraction themselves, more
right.
likely to challenge gender boundaries and things. But that was considered good, so that was never reported as a deficit. And then if you dare challenge the party line, like Professor Mark Regnerus did or something like that, it could cost you your job or your reputation. So people really need to examine this carefully. So, Kady, when you became a Christian, it took you a while, as a young woman coming to faith, it took you a while to fully embrace what Scripture said because of your love for your mom and her partner. Is that an overstatement or a misstatement of your experience?
No, it took me a while to get on board with biblical sexuality. I knew that Jesus died for me and that he loved me, but I wasn't ready to then say, and there is a pattern for, human sexuality that goes along with this. And there's some protectiveness there. But the good news is that the reality is that Christ is seeking us all, and that the reality of the gospel means that everybody, regardless of their relationship status or sexual feeling, is worth seeking after, pursuing, sacrificing for. And so that that biblical worldview exalts the worth of everybody involved in this debate. And so it's not one that diminishes certain people and exalts others. It's one that exalts Christ and then recognizes everyone as image bearers.
Yes, absolutely. All created in God's image. Jesus died for each and every one equally, every one of us equally in need of redemption. The human race fallen, broken outside of the Messiah. Kady, you could address this last question for hours, but in the few minutes we have left, the difference between a mother and a father, what does each one bring that's unique in a child's upbringing?
Well, yeah, you're right. You could go on for hours and hours and hours. But I will say that my husband just posted this picture on Facebook yesterday about a memory from 2 years ago where he took the kids through this kind of wilderness area near our house, and they were climbing a cliff and they got stuck, right? So then he had to come home and get rope and then like put the rope, get the rope down to the kids, and they had to climb up, and it was just this huge adventure. And men tend to bring risk and push boundaries and teach justice to children in ways that women don't. Why is that? Because the aggressive center of their brain is 2.5 times larger than women's, who tend to focus more on the immediate emotional well-being of their kids. You go to the play equipment and you can see it. The kid falls down and bumps himself, and the mom's over there going, "Oh, baby, are you okay?" And the dad's like, "Come on, do it again. Next time you're going to make it." And so that men and women are so different obviously translates to how they parent, whether it's reading stories. Men tend to read stories to their kids full of imagination and using different voices. They play differently. They discipline differently. And children are made for the daily input of both their father and their mother. Neither one is expendable. Neither of them are optional. Both are critical.
Yeah, and with that, if you have, say, a single-parent home, there's a recognition of a deficit and the possibility of that being filled. Let's say one of the parents dies early. You have the possibility of remarriage, but there's a recognition of a deficit, whereas with a same-sex household, by definition, you are excluding the input and involvement of either the mother or the father, by very definition. Kady, give us one last pitch for our listeners for KatyVox.com. Why should they go there? What can they benefit from?
Well, I love Kady Vox because I think a lot of us look at what's going on in the world and we go, "Oh my gosh, this is so crazy. What can I do? I'm not a blogger. I'm not a politician. I'm just a mom, or, I'm just a teacher or whatever." This is what you can do, right? You can come here, you get your friends together, and you study this and you understand it, and you arm yourself with good information, and you do it in a relational environment, in a organization that is very serious about responding with cheerfulness and solutions and recognizing the worth of everybody involved in these conversations, that this is something that everyone can do. And when you're done with the readings, when you go through the syllabus, you feel so much more comfortable talking about these things with your friend, approaching the school administrators at your school when there's something questionable in sex ed, talking with your librarian about, things that you see on the shelves there, or writing your congressman or whatever it is. There are a million things that the layman can do to turn this around. But it means being armed with good information and doing it in a way that is compassionate and relevant. And that's what Kady Vox equips you and me and everyone to do. So I'd say if you're feeling like, I want to do something, I want to make a difference, I don't know what it is, this is what you need to do.
Awesome. Yeah, and Kady, I was unaware of the site and the resource until now, so I will absolutely recommend it. And it has to be like this. It has to be grassroots, moms, dads, educators, people at work, wherever. How can I get involved? How can I make a difference? Keep up the great work. By God's grace, the tide will turn.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You are very welcome. All right, friends, check it out. Go to KatyVox.com. Find out more to connect with Kady directly. AskTheBigot.com.